What are you drinking?
Oh, it's a raspberry soda, which may also contain vodka.
Okay, everybody, I have started recording, but I just thought I'd let them get through that little bit there. As you can see, today I am joined by the cast of Veritas Voices, one of my favourite YouTube channels. I will leave the description in the link below. The only thing I'm going to complain about is the fact that they don't produce enough stuff, because I am actually current with that, the contents of that site, and I'm waiting for the next episode. And when's that going to be, folks?
Mea culpa. Well, our normal episodes premiere every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 6 p.m. in Germany. And unfortunately, I can't give you all the time zones because that's the whole clock. But actually, I was hoping we could release this on our channel as well and have some cross traffic for this week. We've got another topical episode coming up on Christianity, misogyny, authority, how that all interacts in a delightfully terrible way. There'll be lots to talk about on that one. And of course, we have our regular tweets from batshit believers and headlines from hell, which unfortunately is a bit overwhelming to sort these days.
Yeah, I would imagine finding the best ones of those or the worst ones of those must be a pretty difficult job.
You pretty much just have to select a few at random because it's a flood.
But
as regular viewers to my channel know, Lilith's a regular guest, but this is the first time I've had Renee on, and I'm really delighted to have you on, Renee. You are the equal best tweet writer that I know. I always look for your tweets because they're so beautifully well reasoned out and written. And you are equal with Tim Sledge. And if you've ever read any of Tim's tweets,
that's high praise. Tim is bloody brilliant.
Yeah, Tim, I had on a few weeks ago, and he told me that he actually sits and writes his tweets before he actually types them into his computer. And tries to make sure he maximizes the words and lays them out and spends a lot of time trying to make them perfect. And yours rival his, Renee, and that's fantastic, especially since it's not your first language.
Yeah, I don't do that with sitting down and preparing my tweets, because most often I am in a discussion, and then it needs to happen really fast. But sometimes I also do that when I want to do a thread. But that's a huge compliment, because I know Tim, and I see many of his tweets retweeted very often. And considering that my style of tweeting is probably a lot different from his, that's a huge compliment. My style of tweeting probably includes more cursing.
I don't think anyone could blame you, especially not these days.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that Tim has to work at it, but you're a natural.
Yeah, I delight in such language, and I think I've also many arguments that I regularly use, and I simply rephrase them, but simply I know the talking points that many atheists use, and therefore nothing they can really say surprises me. And once they interact with me, in most, if not all cases, I have an instant rebuttal that I just need to formulate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to Neil a couple of days ago. Neil, the 604 atheist, for anybody who's not familiar with him, but we all know Neil really well.
Oh, yeah.
And I was talking to him about his appearance on Talk Heathen the other day, and yeah, he did a really brilliant job on there. He was on with V, and there were so many phone calls where I just thought I would just go straight for the jugular, because I could see what they were trying to say, and I would go straight for it. And they were really patient and actually managed to get a better conversation because of that. I don't know about you, but if I was on the show like that, I'd just be immediately going, argument from ignorance, or, special pleading, the second the guy says anything. I don't know.
And that's the thing, is we can tag these things, but people don't necessarily understand the logic behind it. And too often Christians are either not aware of or haven't considered how unjustified the assumptions underlying their arguments are. It's very common when they're saying you can't have logic without God. Well, why? What about logic makes you think God would have anything to do with it? And it's an underlying authority that anything real, or assumption that anything real needs to be based on an authority, which is the weakest argument in existence and absurd as a basis for logic, but they're still making that assumption and they're not even necessarily aware of it.
Like, one thing that I also think we need to watch out for is, while we've all heard and rebutted Kalam 1,000 times maybe, when people call into the Talk Heathen show, maybe they just heard the arguments once, never heard the rebuttals, and are not even aware that there are any rebuttals, and think like they're calling into the show like the boss, and they're instantly gonna convert 3 people on the spot to their flavor of theism. And while that is obviously very naive, many of them are simply not aware that the apologetics that they endorse are lacking.
Very lacking. Also, I feel like a lot of these conversations seem to happen on autopilot. They keep making the same statements to us that we've refuted 1,000 times, and they never listen to our rebuttals. But at the same time, we keep using the same rebuttals, phrased the same way, that apologists have already found some way to misrepresent, that, convolutedly shuffle away so that they feel it's invalid without even really listening to it. Which is why one of the things I've tried to do is find a new way to draw out what they're really saying, so they have to take a look at it. Like, are you actually saying, and this is one of those times when you have to be very, very blunt, but in a way that they haven't heard 1,000 times before.
Yeah.
Like,
I did say,
why should your lack of understanding mean that you know there's a God? You don't know, therefore you know? That makes no sense.
Look, there it isn't.
I did see a good rebuttal to the column that I hadn't seen before on the Cosmic Skeptic channel, where he talked about it being a fallacy of composition.
Yeah,
definitely.
So use that one quite frequently. It's either a fallacy of composition or it begs the question. It's either of the two, necessarily.
Or both. Usually both.
Yeah, there was another one I liked where somebody had laid it out like, as a syllogism, and it was saying everything that starts to exist is an rearrangement of things that already exist.
Yeah. Which is actually far more true in the universe we observe. The seed is planted in the ground, it becomes a tree by taking material from the air and the ground and heat from the sun and the water from the rain and all the rest of it. It doesn't just bring tree into existence out of nothing because energy woo.
Yeah, exactly. So their comparison to how, God poofing the universe into existence is not the same as what we observe within the universe.
It's another case of projection too, because they keep saying that we are insisting on the universe coming from nothing, like literally creation ex nihilo, when that is the argument of Christianity, that God made everything out of nothing until he made Adam, because apparently he ran out of nothing, so he had to make a mud doll.
Yeah. One thing which I've heard in the past, because this sort of observation, everything that begins to exist is previously composed from other stuff, that's sort of something that theoretical bullshit has pointed out, or Scott Clifton, and it's sort of a version of the honest Kalam, but then and instantly say, well, why should I accept this premise? And then what you can reply with is, in the words of William Lane Craig, it seems to me wholly unobjectionable to say that this principle enjoys experiential support. Should we just ignore the uniform data of experience in support of premise 1 and behave as if it were just as likely as its opposite? Talk about being blind to the evidence.
There you go, William Lane Craig. You just disproved the Kalam.
Anyway, should we move on to look at some talking points for today? I thought I'd do a bit of a twist on your tweets from batshit believers. So I've got a couple of tweets from batshit believers that we can discuss. But I love the brilliant ones that we sometimes see from our side of things. And I thought I'd start with one of those, which was this wonderful graph that we have here in black and yellow, which are the colours of your little logo, Lilith.
Yes, thank you, the Phoenix.
And for those of you who listen to this in audio format, what we have here is a bar graph where the bars are very, very low on the left of the graph. And that's the part of the graph where we need to close the schools. And on the right, we've got these towering columns, which are like the Manhattan skyline compared to sort of houses. And it says, it's tough to see how this part of the graph means let's reopen them. So what do you think about that?
I know. Oh, new cases by day. This is American logic. I don't want it to be true, so it isn't true. That's not how reality works.
And pretty much one thing which has been speculated about both in Germany as well as in America to eventually happen is that there was going to be a second wave, or in the world and in America. But as far as I'm concerned, there isn't going to be a second wave because it's not going to stop. It's not going to go down anytime soon. And what there will be come October is probably a tsunami.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say there's a second wave when the first wave never went down. And there was actually, I wish I'd got it for this. There was a cartoon of, a wall, welcome to the United States of America. And you've got, just general chaos behind it. You've got, flags of Nazis and the Southern rebel flag, and you've got fists and screaming, and you've got the Canadian beaver like locked the door back, holding it, going, just no. It's like, keep it locked. And that's the truth. We've closed the borders to non-essential travel with America. And there have been some irresponsible Americans who've been using the loophole to get through to Alaska to just come and be irresponsible jackass tourists, like with no masks, going to things they don't need to go to. I'm like, America is, it's a terrible country. I'm sorry. I don't think we can call it a civilized nation any longer. I honestly don't think it has been for a while now. And I think the rest of the world, this is one, if there's any silver lining in Trump's behavior to the rest of the world, it's that we need to start making all of our economies less reliant on dealing with the toddler on Vicodin. We need to start dealing with each other, Australia, Canada, Germany, all of Europe. Let's all start making other friends that aren't out of their goddamn minds. And then, maybe they'll stop tantruming eventually and they can be brought back to the grown-ups table, possibly, maybe eventually. But right now, the rest of us need to live and act like grown-ups.
Yeah, and Lilith, you know what I oftentimes refer to America as, right? Trump-Afghanistan.
Currently, yes. But yeah, those people will still be there even when Trump is gone.
But I think in many ways that may also in a sense not be entirely accurate, because I think America was pretty much fucked before Trump ever came to power. But Trump definitely made it worse. And one thing which I also wanted, which I saw on Twitter, and I think Lilith, you saw it as well, was Michael Polkovich pretty much saying, what if it was Trump's plan to pretty much fuck America over in order so that Mexicans do want to build the wall and that they actively pay for it just to stay away from America?
That's one way to get people to pay for your wall.
Michael's brilliant, isn't he? We've talked about Michael a few times, Lilith.
I love him.
I've actually tried to get him on for an interview, and he just says he doesn't do that, and it's such a shame. Especially, I mean, I know it would be boring for everybody else, and Neil and I did this a bit as well, but we'd probably spend quite a bit talking about progressive rock, which to me is the ultimate evolution in music ever. And but Michael's insight into so many things, he's such a smart guy. I mean, obviously he designed stuff that goes into space, so he's smart.
Yeah. And
he's an actual rocket scientist.
And I think he's also a bit familiar, at least with Germany, because he once told me that he was in Schwarzwald, which is a region in Germany. But yeah, I think if the Mexicans are actually, I don't know this, but if they are actually building a wall so that people don't go to America, I think they're pretty much smart for it, because at the moment
they've banned Americans from coming into Mexico for non-essential. And this is the problem, especially for Canada and Mexico. We have Canada has the largest unprotected land border in the world with America. And I mean, you look at maps of the cases, you've got like 3 red dots in Canada, 4 maybe a little hot spots. We had an outbreak of 18 people in this one city. It's big dramatic news. And, you just look at America and it's like just a rash, literally, all over the southern half of the country and up into the north in many areas.
It's just not where are the red spots, but where are the black spots?
Yeah, the clear spots. Yeah, where are the clear spots? Oh, there's a little bit of Maine that is safe.
When I was talking to Neil the other day, one of the talking points we had was that there were 260 cases at one church.
Well, God's protecting them.
I'm not sure where. I got a tweet. There was a picture of the church. I would have imagined from the size of the church that we're pretty much talking the whole congregation. We're not talking 260 out of Joel Osteen's.
No. And this is actually, my roommate sent me a suggestion for Headlines from Hell, which is not as current. We've talked before about pastors who have died from COVID who refused to stop doing services. But this one idiot, he was claiming he could heal by the laying on of hands, which for clarity is a biblical principle. If any of you is sick, let him go to the elders. They will anoint him with oil, lay their hands on him and pray, and he will be healed. That's in the New Testament, pretty much verbatim. Verbatim, depending on your translation. But that's the thing. He would lay hands on people, and I have seen this done, which if it's, I pray for you, brother, sister, whatever, that you will be fine, whatever. But he literally had people come in to be blessed against COVID, and he has now died of COVID. This is my shocked face. I am so shocked. Gasp.
If God exists, then at the very least he has humor. Sorry about
yes.
that.
I made the observation the other day that Jesus actually seems to be helping his followers get sick.
Yeah, apparently he wants them to all come home. He couldn't just rapture them. No. He has to kill them all slowly and painfully. But interestingly enough, Black Lives Matter protests have not caused the same spikes in many cases because people have worn masks and, at least tried to maintain some degree of social distancing and taken some precautions to protect each other.
Yeah, the protests that we had here in Western Australia, I didn't actually go to them because I'm certainly not going to big gatherings of any sort. But they moved it to a bigger venue so that people could spread out more.
Which is a responsible thing to do. But Christians in America won't do that. Have you ever heard the term persecution porn?
No.
Oh, do I have a story for you? It's actually
Go
a
for it.
proud Christian tradition. Many people like to pretend that the problems with modern evangelical Christianity are totally new. And this is just some, offshoot that's not the real Christianity. But the truth is, Christianity has been wanking off to its own perceived persecution and hyping up the stories and sometimes just plain inventing them since day one. Evidence of that would be Fox's Book of Martyrs. The stories of the soundbite, Would They Have Died for a Lie, that talks about the horrific deaths of all of the apostles. Those come from apocryphal writings that no one included in the Bible because they were so clearly unbelievable, in versions of reality where you could survive a beheading and still preach, or, just all kinds of ridiculous nonsense. And these are the versions that get those "the apostles died proudly being tortured because" reasons, because they were so proud of the Jeebus. And but Fox's Book of Martyrs, so old that it's Foxye, Fox's Book of Martyrs. The name of the fellow assembled it. Tales of torture and persecution and people who bravely died for their faith in Christ. And modern versions have come together with stories, possibly some authentic, some definitely exaggerated, or possibly invented because there's no other way they would have known the details included. Fictionalized from Russia, from all the countries behind the Iron Curtain during the communist regimes, from China in particular, who does, granted, sometimes horrifically mistreat people of religious convictions, as they're doing now with Muslims, and they did do to Christians prior. But the idea that the devil is after us, and in these godless regimes, he will come for us. And this is why any infringement on their absolute privilege is seen by Christians in fundamentalist America as the first step to them being put in concentration camps because they won't deny Jesus. And it's like, no, you can't treat gay people like shit. I won't deny Jesus. They think that you're putting a gun to their head. Whoa. I said don't treat people like shit. That's all I said. Go Jesus as much as you want on the weekends, just don't be a dick to everyone. You can't make me deny my faith, because it goes immediately from, I have received any opposition to anything I perceive as being a part of my religion for any reason in any degree whatsoever, to, you want me to deny Jesus or you'll kill me. Probably very dramatically.
The things that's within the nature of Christianity, that Christianity is oppressive, and for them, right to their religion and freedom of religion for them means freedom to impose their religion, and if you can't impose the religion, then you're somehow persecuted.
But they also want to be persecuted, not literally, really, in a way that persecution would actually exist, but in a dramatic narrative. They want a dramatic narrative where they are the heroes standing against the oppression, but they will nobly go forth and they will not deny. And this is the story they are selling to themselves every day. And if someone opposes them, on one level, they're horrifically angry, but on another level, they feel vindicated. And Jehovah's Witnesses are one of the worst groups for this, where any persecution means that we are the one true faith, because obviously, why else would Satan be opposing us if we weren't telling the truth and doing the right thing?
Yeah. That it doesn't really work, obviously.
It does if you think everything is God or the devil and nothing exists in a reality with nuance or any degree of anything.
That's like pretty much playing tennis without the net. If people turn to become Jehovah's Witnesses, and if more and more people convert to your religion, well, see how all these people are converting. Obviously, we must be speaking the truth, otherwise people wouldn't be convinced. And if they are unconvinced, and if they are against you, well, that just vindicates what God and Jesus says about us.
Yeah,
it's interesting what you were saying about the persecution. Just yesterday, it's funny how often how this happens. I think it must be God arranging it, that sometimes I read something and it actually becomes relevant in one of these conversations. Yeah, thank you, God.
God apparently doesn't like his church very much.
No. But the whole story about Christians being thrown to the lions in the Colosseum seems to be pretty much made up. And they can actually attribute it to Eusebius, who we know has been, had the finger pointed at him quite a bit for making stuff up. For example, a lot of people suspect that he was the author of the Testimonium Flavinium, but apparently he was the one that started the story about the Christians being thrown to the lions.
It's interesting because church fathers that were, lived closer to the time of persecution will actually say that God restrained the rage of their oppressors and the number martyred could be easily counted. I'm not saying nobody ever suffered for being a Christian, usually for taking really extreme and dramatic stances unnecessarily by being a Christian. But yeah, it's, the sources at the time, even of church fathers, don't support this horrific mass persecution. Again, not saying nobody was harmed at any time or executed, but it was usually because they took an unnecessarily extreme stance, were ridiculously belligerent, and took, granted, what was the punishment at the time, which is very extreme and horrific, but it was what anyone would have had at that time for that crime. It wasn't something special invented for the Christians because they are just so practiced.
Just to finish this little section, the cartoon underneath really sort of sums up what we've got. So it's a couple of people standing outside of a school. The school's on fire, and they're saying, "I can't believe the school is on fire. Thank God we got the kids out in time." And then they wait a little while and the fire's got much worse. Well, we better send the kids back in there. But the fire's only gotten worse. Sure, but consider how much it costs to keep them out here. And I think it really sums it up.
COVID must be the best argument for anti-theism that I know, because the attitude that what I believe doesn't matter as long as it feels good to me. No, if your expectations and reality do not agree, your expectations are wrong. Reality is not wrong.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? We as scientifically minded people, we would observe reality, and we would then say, well, if a hypothesis X is true, like if God exists, then would protectors believe us? Evidently believe us unprotected, so therefore God most likely doesn't exist. But
at least not that one.
That one with a 10-foot pole, because then
I've got another take on that, Renee. Actually, I think that God has given his followers the brains to follow the directions of the medical profession, and they're choosing to ignore it.
Yes, why would God gift us with reason if he did not wish us to use it, is the quote, I believe. Some people may say this is clearly a comic about COVID and about the American Republicans insisting on reopening schools, despite the fact that they're basically sentencing a bunch of children to death by doing so. Great job there. What does this have to do with religion? But I would point out it may be correlation, not causation inherently, but first, it's the evangelical fundamentalist Christian right that is insisting on this, partly because they're in bed with business, and partly because of their attitude underneath. Betsy DeVoe, for example, who has been put in charge of education, despite the fact that she doesn't believe in education, and is a young earth creationist who homeschooled her own children with deceitful Christian fundamentalist propaganda as opposed to actual information. And she's the one who wants to reopen the schools because again, it's this idea underlying that we can insist reality should do what we want it to do. And if it doesn't, it's obviously some evil supernatural power, and we will make it bend to our will.
Yeah. So we will do that by appealing to another supernatural power that we cannot see and that will somehow help us, even though there's no evidence for it, and even though, yeah.
Have you ever noticed the only thing God seems to do consistently is fuck up?
Yeah.
Did you ever see that talk? Did you ever see that talk by Matt Dillahunty? It was in part of his Australian tour, where
the Unholy Trinity.
Yes, and he talks about he sees God as a bungler, and he just goes through this story of God making mistake after mistake and having
everything goes wrong for God. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
There's a term I came up with for that, actually, omni-incompetent. It seems to be the only omni attribute I can genuinely attribute to God as he is represented by Christianity and, well, all the Abrahamic faiths. Omni-incompetent. There is nothing that he cannot fuck up.
Yeah, but he certainly has these omniscience failures from time to time, having to drown the entire world, including, koalas, whatever they, did to offend him so much.
Yeah, those evil fucking koalas with their cuteness and their munching of eucalyptus leaves. Maybe they rode the kangaroos. Do you think they rode the kangaroos back from the Ark? It's the only thing that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Hey, coaches!
One thing that I've heard about, I don't think that a serious ministry like Answers in Genesis would endorse this, but one theory that I've heard, how some animals got back to their original places was they were sort of holding onto a piece of wood, and then they were jumping into a volcano, and then the volcano erupted and fired them all the way back to their place.
Yes, I've heard that one as well. Should we name it the ballistic repopulation hypothesis?
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you something. It's like if you've ever seen, there's a series put together by a rather obnoxious cult leader called
Ken Copeland?
No. He's the Restored Church of God guy, and Aaron Ra did a series rebutting him, disproving irrefutable proof of God.
Yeah,
David CPAC, that's what it is. And Aaron Ra, I can honestly only watch him in Aaron Ra's series because watching him for more than 5 minutes makes me want to put my head through something sharp. But it's at one point, like 6 episodes in, Aaron Ra is so sick of this guy's ignorance. He's like, you're wrong. There is no God. And the way I know this is if there was, he would have slapped the shit out of you by now. And I kind of feel like that. Like, if there is a God and these are his followers, the fuck, dude. The fuck.
Yeah, I often think that if heaven is actually spending time with the likes of, Kenneth Copeland and Paula White and people like that, then, thanks, I'll go the other way.
And contemporary Christian music. You know what's the creepiest thing about contemporary Christian music that a lot of people don't know because they haven't unfortunately had to listen to it? It's that God is the Father and Jesus is the husband of the church in analogy. There's lots of lines like Jesus, lover of my soul, but it also gets convoluted with the God the Father, caring and loving stuff. So you end up with some stuff that sounds really messed up if you just listen to the lyrics.
I was just thinking about the fact that you mentioned Christian music there. I was listening to the Thinking Atheist podcast yesterday, and Seth was talking about what's upcoming on the show. And apparently one of the lead singers from one of these Christian bands is coming on because he's become an atheist.
Oh, is this the fellow from Newsboys, or is this a more recent deconvert?
I can't remember.
Because Newsboys now, the version that's doing the God's Not Dead soundtracks, is led by Michael Tate, who was one of the 3 original in DC Talk. This is what I get for growing up Christian. But the original headmen in the original Newsboys, which quite frankly actually had some good music because they were genuinely talented. One of them, at least, it was never really that big a thing. It was that his friend's mom was overbearing. They could only play Christian music. So they did. And they actually really genuinely do have some good stuff prior. But when he was honest about his beliefs, and then he had to disengage, and then a few of the remaining members took on Michael Tate, and they went really extra Jesus-y. There was always a bit of tongue-in-cheek, a bit of humor with the old Newsboys, sort of the Breakfast Club. They don't serve breakfast in hell. They had this chorus, when the toast is burned and all the milk has turned and Captain Crunch is waving farewell. When the big one finds you, may this song remind you that they don't serve breakfast in hell. And okay, yeah, hell. But there was at least some humor to it. There was, and the music itself, they had some talented musicians. And now it's just turned into this, God's Not Dead propaganda hype thing. And it's too bad because even Tate has more talent than that. But
okay, so we're going to move on to our second talking point. But before that, Renee, I can see you've got some certificates on the wall behind you. Are those your colouring certificates from 3rd grade?
Those are certificates for me learning how to swim, and I also played football, or as they would call it in America, falsely I might add, soccer. And I pretty much have all the trophies that I earned as a child still in my room. And
so you're saying you're sporty?
I used to be sporty. At the moment, I don't have much time for sports, but I have become more of a brain, I think.
Fair enough.
I beat them with this, but you can always beat them with that.
It's true. It is the more versatile muscle, shall we say?
Yeah, I was only joking when I said that about the colouring certificate.
But I know you love the team.
But he's got his I can swim 25 meters breaststroke up there.
Yeah.
Hey. Well, 25 meters. How far is it? Breaststroke is nice, though. I like using breaststroke because when you windmill, I always get water up my nose. I hate that. I prefer to keep my head above water when I'm just doing long swims.
Sorry, I should have put my other gloves on. I've just face palmed when you said that. My wife holds her nose when she goes down a water slide.
Okay. You know what? Honestly, some noses are shaped differently. And there was even a case I remember watching. They were going through marine training, and this one fellow had, they didn't know it initially, but when they were doing the water training, he had a medical thing that actually made it impossible for him to stop water from going into his nose and down his throat. I mean, you could breathe out, so you could do it for a few seconds, but not anywhere near what was required for marine training. So once it was diagnosed, they could deal with it, and he just, defaulted 1 week back to the next group. But they found a way to deal with it. But yeah, honestly, some people are far more prone to having water go down their nose. It's just about the internal shape. It's nothing that can be done. You just have to buy a nose plug.
Yeah.
Big spender.
So let's move to our second point, which was this tweet by Braxton Hunter. So we're going on to a batshit believer tweet here.
Yes,
I don't know what
Braxton.
I don't know what this was in response to, but he says, great examples today of fingers in ears skeptics who seem to simply refuse to believe people come to faith in Christ from atheism. As an opening gambit here, I would say that there's all sorts of people that go from all sorts of beliefs to others. There's certainly atheists who become Muslims, and Hindus and all sorts of things. So it doesn't speak anything to his particular religion. And
well, like I said in the off game show, I think he's projecting really hard. I get the feeling Braxton is dealing with some doubts and he's trying to project at atheists really hard in the hopes that we'll validate his irrationality by responding irrationally, and then he can feel good about where he is. That's what I think is going on. Could be wrong. We'll see.
One thing which I would say is that, yes, atheists can come from the atheism to faith in Christ, but what I would argue cannot happen is atheists like us, atheists who have dealt with the apologetics arguments, who have refuted them, who have listened to both sides of the argument, and who quite simply have found his faith to be lacking. I don't think that those people can come to a faith in Christ because we know better.
The magic trick once seen through can no longer deceive.
Yeah, but if you're uninformed and then you, for the first time, hear this neat argument, the Kalam argument by William Lane Craig, and you aren't aware of the rebuttals, aren't even looking for them, then you come to a belief in God. And if you then accept the minimal facts approach and also don't look into that, then you can also come to a belief in Christ. But once you maybe don't accept the Holy Spirit and don't become a Christian for the reasons like feeling Jesus in your heart, but you simply accept Christianity based on the evidence that you've encountered. But once that gets challenged, then you can also quite rapidly go from Christian to atheist again.
I will say this, there's a couple of points that I need to bring up in reference to this, because Christianity, and I was taught this as a Christian, so I'm not coming here with any kind of outside info. People who come to Christianity most often come either before their late teens or at a point in time when something tragic or terrible happens and God has softened their heart, by which is meant they're pounced on when they're vulnerable. Now, there's also a problem here with the fact that pastors and apologists tell all kinds of idiotic lies about atheism, and they also try and tag everything not them as atheism, because they like to have a very clear black and white opposite. They don't like to acknowledge nuance or look into the details of other beliefs. So there have been cases, for example, where there was a Christian who was devout and then they went off the path. They didn't stop believing in God. They didn't become an atheist. They just became frustrated or distracted, or stuff came up in their life and they went off, just dealing with reality for a while, because that's a thing. And then at a rough time in their life, they were approached by someone evangelical and felt convicted for their backsliding, and then are ushered back into the fold and become super hyper evangelical, hyped up. They were never at any point an atheist. They didn't actually stop believing in God or even really give it consideration. They were just like, oh, this is bullshit. It's not helping me. I've got to deal with life, became distracted, and then were dragged back in. So there are cases like that would absolutely be labeled by someone like this as someone being an atheist and then coming to Christianity, when it's in fact reverting to Christianity, or to more intense Christianity, after having sort of a minimal level of involvement and commitment. I'm not saying this is the case with all converts or reconverts or converted from atheist types, but particularly evangelicals are far more prone to labeling all kinds of things atheism, as long as someone has left them behind, no matter what it is, including New Age beliefs, with all kinds of spiritual woo.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think we should move on, because the next one is always makes me laugh.
I love this one. This one got me blocked.
The mock-up magazine, and the magazine is called Religious Con Artist, and I love this. Across the top, there's the banner: 20 scientists who will say anything for money.
It's true. Wait, someone was saying to Richard Dawkins, if you lack money in your old age, just go to the Templeton Foundation and say something nice about God. You could write your own check.
Yeah.
And you could. He could. He totally.
Yeah.
He wouldn't because he has integrity, but he could. Just saying.
Absolutely. Gay affairs and how to keep yours anonymous. How to get that last dollar from a poor person. That's one of our favourites, isn't it? The prosperity gospel. We love talking about that. Using a smile to pretend you have feelings. Has got Joel Osteen on the cover. Joel Osteen, how I swindled Christians into buying me 2 mansions.
It's true. He has mansions. It's a parsonage. I'm like, I quote John Oliver. Yeah, only if by parsonage you mean house that looks like it costs the net worth of Big Bang's Jim Parsons. Like,
actually, there's a Christian apologist or Christian evangelist. I think he's even on Twitter, and his last name is Swindle.
Oh yes, Swindle. That's I believe he's actually an older apologist or someone who's quoted a lot. But actually, Joel Osteen is 50. Did you know that?
Whoa, he's old. Like.
Oh, thanks, Renee.
Does look 50, but to me looks
no. But look at him. He's like he's all plastic and veneers. His teeth. Honestly, him and his wife, I refer to them as plastics because they look like plastics with perisiles on, and I'm like, there's just something very unnatural about it. Just kind of.
Yeah. Like just looking at him right now, having the information that he's 50. Yeah, I can definitely see the detox.
What is that?
Maybe I used the wrong word. Sort of the thing that you get into your
Botox. Botox.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. See the edges of his eyes where he's trying to. That's the only part that can move. Is just under his eye to the side. It's sort of like this. I can move here when I smile, and it's perfectly flat. Ooh, he doesn't look like people. I'm not even against a bit of plastic surgery. You want to have a bit of upkeep and you can afford it. Great. You do you. But he just, everything about it is this creepy veneer. And I've been trying to get a betting pool on whether he's going to be taken down by a sex scandal or a money scandal. I honestly think he's just a crook. He hasn't been hateful enough to gays to be like a closeted sexual predator of some kind. I know it's a correlation argument. I'm just saying results are sufficiently consistent that I feel like I can make that bet.
I just noticed the banner across the bottom of this as well that says Bible verses to avoid.
Yeah. Oh, so true.
The ones that make us hypocrites.
Yes. Yeah. What would be your favourite Bible verses, Renee, that would you would avoid if you were somebody like Joel Osteen?
That's a good question. Like, I would probably refer to something like Jesus calling out the people in the streets for selling stuff in the church, or there's something like the Father's house shouldn't be a house of merchandise. And yeah,
the Luke version of the Beatitudes: blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. How terrible for you are rich, for you have had your ease. How terrible when all men speak well of you.
Yeah.
For their ancestors said the same of the false prophets.
And the thing about a camel having a greater chance of passing through a needle than a rich person going to heaven.
Yeah, that's a good one. around the time of the Schofield Bible, the original Schofield Bible, there was a story passed around that the eye of the needle was, if the gates were closed, there was like a small side door called the eye of the needle. And so, you know, if you brought a caravan in, you couldn't really you could get your camels to like crawl through on their knees, but you couldn't, the idea being you couldn't bring, you know, a bunch of, it was very hard to get in. And I'm like, honestly, I accepted that story without question when I was a Christian. I've never seen any evidence for it. I've just heard that claim. And I kind of wonder, you know, it might just be completely bogus.
Yeah.
It might.
Wouldn't be the first time.
No.